Now we call on stage Dr. Abhijit Baldota, Dr. Vineet Rao, and Dr. Ravindra Joshi.
Good morning, everybody.
Can I please
Earnest
request you to
request
be seated?
all to take their seats.
Please.
In the beginning, on account of International Women's Day, we salute to all the women. Dear friends, right now there is a wave of fear all over the world regarding coronavirus. And we have none other than Dr. Bharat Purandare to elaborate on coronavirus, the present status. I'm sure he is going to give justice fully to this topic. We are eager to listen to him now.
Thank you. Very good morning to all of you. First of all, let me thank the organizers, Dr. Unni, and all the organizers of this very beautiful conference that they have given me an opportunity to speak in front of you. And with the permission of chairpersons, let's have some discussion on this important topic of coronavirus. I think everybody wants to know about the topic, or maybe everybody knows.
All are eager to listen to you.
And we'll have some questions at the end because it's in public domain. The whole topic is in public domain. For the first time, I think this epidemic, right from day one, we have got information coming into public domain. How many cases today, how many cases tomorrow? And every day WHO is releasing something called the situation report. And so everybody is getting updated, and in social media and everybody, you know, we are finding it everywhere that this epidemic, I think it is a little bit too much hyped also, but it's there for sure. It's killing people, and we have to know at least some basic things about this. So I'm going to restrict my talk today on a few basic aspects of coronavirus. We have in India, as of now, 31 cases, 34 cases, that was today's count, and none of them have died up till now, fortunately. All right, so this case was referred to me some time back. Those who are clinicians maybe will be finding such kind of reports coming into them. So this was a 45-year-old lady who was diabetic, and she was having rheumatoid arthritis. She was on methotrexate and also on oral antidiabetic agents. She recently traveled to Gujarat for some family reason. And after coming back, she developed this fever, cough, and after 2 to 3 days, she started getting breathlessness. This was the X-ray which showed bilateral reticular nodular ground glass kind of opacities. She was hypoxic. And then this report was found in her paper, which showed that this coronavirus 229E was detected in her upper respiratory secretions. So after we come across such a report as a clinician, then what we should do? So, I mean, these are the options that I have given. Like, should I ask her that she has traveled to China in past 14 days? Unlikely, because she's gone to Gujarat and not to China. Or can I sort of run to find for myself an N95 mask? I see some people sitting over here with N95 mask. And we are also going to talk something about use of mask in today's epidemic. Or should I call the hospital infection control team or infectious disease team and ask them what to do? Or should I inform the Naidu hospital, which is the infectious disease hospital in this city, what to do? Should I send the patient over there or just run away? What should be done? So the answer is none of them should be done. Because if you go back to the report, you will find that these are the four known human coronaviruses which have been known for last maybe 15-20 years that they are infecting humans. And this is not the nCoV, which is a novel coronavirus. So it's a routine coronavirus. And sometimes you may also have seen in your social media that a particular antiseptic has this coronavirus activity and those photographs clicked. So these are those coronaviruses. And that kind of antiseptic has not been tested against nCoV. So people are generating a lot of misinformation. So this patient has a coronavirus infection, no doubt about it, but it is not the novel coronavirus. And she will possibly gradually recover. And that's what actually happened to her, that gradually she recovered on her own without doing much thing. Of course, she received loads of antibiotic that normally happens when somebody lands up in ICU, but she recovered. And so none of these things had to be done. So talking about this outbreak, that it was very interesting how this epidemic unfolded, that one keen observer, a doctor like you and me, possibly an intensivist, noticed that lot of cases of a typical kind of pneumonia, I mean pneumonia with normal or low WBC counts, bilateral ones causing a lot of hypoxia, something like which we saw in H1N1. All of you must have managed those cases, are coming in large numbers and they are getting intubated, some of them are dying. And he tried to alert the authorities that something is there and we need to investigate. H1N1 possibly was tested in them, but it came out to be negative. So authorities initially, as they just turned the blind eye towards what he was saying, and then gradually they found that this clustering of those pneumonia cases have started happening from December or end of November onwards was actually because of a novel coronavirus. So how did they actually find that coronavirus was also an interesting article. So in which they actually found that they ran a pan-viral PCR on the samples of those people. And they found that the coronavirus band was present. But when they tried to analyze that coronavirus band, none of those four which were known in the previous one, these four, none of them was there. But it was showing the band of the coronavirus family, and that's how they diagnosed it. It must be some coronavirus, but it is not in among these four. And then they found that yes, this must be a new coronavirus, so they named it as a novel coronavirus, or NCOV 2019. And then we found that the cases rapidly escalated. The epidemic soon didn't get limited only to the Wuhan city or the Hubei province of China, but to other provinces of China, outside of China, and it soon became a global epidemic. Now, as of 6th of March of 2020, this was the 46th WHO situation report, which is getting released daily, which I'll show you in next few slides. We've got 80,000 odd cases reported globally. Now, they are all proven as well as clinically suspected cases. And out of that, 3,330 have died, and infections have been reported from 88 countries. At the end of January, WHO declared this as a public health emergency of international concern, but they have not yet declared it as a pandemic. But probably soon they will now declare it as a pandemic. And then, as we are always fond of medical scientists, they are giving first name, then they are giving second name, and they are changing names. So this virus was now termed as novel coronavirus 2019. Now they are saying that it should be named as SARS-CoV-2. And the disease which it causes is called as coronavirus infectious disease, or COVID-19. So coming back to the original knowledge that we have got about these coronaviruses are circular viruses which are positive strand or single stranded RNA viruses, and they have got these solar corona-like knobs on their surface which are made up of proteins. They are called as surface glycoproteins. It is also called as spike protein or S protein. And that's why they look like a corona, and therefore they are named as coronaviruses. Now initially, medical science, when it detected coronaviruses, it was detected from the animals, and now we also found that at least 4 of them, and now the number is increased to 7 of them can also cause human infections. So they are known to cause respiratory infections. So all of us have suffered from something called as common cold or rhinitis. So the commonest cause of that is rhinovirus, of course, but you know what is the second common cause? Second common cause is coronavirus. So coronavirus not only causes rhinitis, but it can also cause pharyngitis, laryngitis. Sometimes, we get sudden voice holiday. All of you must have experienced. So coronavirus may be a cause of it. Then croup, epiglottitis, lower respiratory infections, and also acute gastroenteritis. So they are known respiratory and enteric pathogens. As I told you, there were initially 4, but now that list includes 7 human viruses. And we have genetically mapped all the genome of the virus, and we have found that it has got nearly 88% homology to this SARS-like coronavirus. So SARS epidemic, which came in 2003, some of you may have witnessed it, or some of you may have treated those patients. So good amount of homology is there in the structure about SARS. So this is what WHO has released. It's called a situation report, which is released yesterday. So we have got cases coming all over, and hotspots are basically in the China, South Korea, Italy, and Iran. So they are the hotspots of the disease. And initially, so I was seeing this report daily. So initially it was only China at very high risk, and the entire world or regional and global was only moderate or high, and now this has changed to very high because the epidemic has gone out of China. We are now finding local transmissions, and it has gone really out, and Chinese cases are now declining, and cases outside of the China have now surpassed the cases which are coming from China. So this is how the cases started escalating. So this yellow bar is cases outside the China, these pink bars are the cases from the China, and now the data from after this is showing that this is coming down, and this green part is increasing, cases outside of the China are increasing. They have surpassed the cases coming from China. This is the structure of the coronavirus. So it's a circular virus, and what I was talking, these knob-like surface glycoproteins are the very characteristic ones, and they are the ones which are important for the virulence or the pathogenesis of this particular bug. And then there are this surface protein, M protein, and so many other proteins are there. This hemagglutinin esterase dimer is there. So this is a structure of the coronavirus. And this is the life cycle of the virus, that the virus actually has this surface protein attaches to a receptor on the respiratory epithelial cell. And these receptors have been extensively investigated, and we have found that it is ACE2, that is angiotensin convertase enzyme 2, that is this receptor. So it attaches there, then endocytosis happens, then genetic material of the virus gets released, and we have got a lot of subgenomic RNA. So a lot of RNA which actually doesn't contribute to the further progeny of the virus is made, and out of them certain of them are genomic RNAs which are then enveloped into a new virus. It goes into the endoplasmic reticulum, and through the Golgi vesicles exocytosis happens. So this is the life cycle, and this is an important step in the viral life cycle, because this subgenomic RNA, multitudes of these RNAs are there which are not contributing into the actual future progeny which actually buds out of the infected cell. This is causing multiple viral quasi-species which is prone for mutations, and this virus is hypermutable, and therefore we will have definitely problems while creating a vaccine for this particular virus. So this is the phylogenetic analysis of the coronavirus. It is important to know, because this which is shown in red, this is having homology to, as I told you, the bat SARS-CoV. So it has actually picked up some genetic material from the bat virus, and it has also picked up some material genetic from the bat SARS-like virus, and this has become actually a genetically reassorted virus, like how H1N1 came. And there is no pre-existing or what we call as a herd immunity, and that's why all of us are very, very prone to get infection because of this virus. Now this is there are actually 27 strains which have been fully genetically, their genome sequencing has been done. It has been divided into 6 kind of genotypes, this virus. So this shows that there is a hypermutability, genetic hypermutability in this virus, which is a matter of concern for scientists. So it has been hypothesized that this is a very famous delicacy in China, bat soup. So from the bat, actually it jumped to some intermediate host, which we don't know which is that intermediate host. From that intermediate host, it picked up some genetic material from these viruses, and then it became this novel coronavirus, and now it is infecting humans. So this is supposed to be the pathogenesis of this particular epidemic. So how do these people present? So you all remember those H1N1 cases, it is almost exactly same like that. There is hardly any difference. So they will all present, most common symptom will be fever, nearly 80% of them will have fever. Almost 60 to 70% will have cough, myalgias, headaches. Some of them, a small percentage of them will have diarrheas. Some of them will have hemoptysis. Some of them will go on to develop dyspnea. And a large population is supposed to be actually asymptomatic. And so this is the range, and then some of them will actually go on to develop pneumonia, respiratory failure, they will have ARDS, they will go on to ventilator. If you check their CBC, you will find that the WC count is normal, but they get this lymphopenia, which is very characteristic in many viral pneumonias that we find. Elevated CRP and sometimes also elevated CPK is also found in this particular infection. Now I'm not going to details of the criteria given by the WHO for the clinical severity, but for us to understand broadly that there are these 4 categories: mild, moderate, severe, critical. So from here, the patient is non-hypoxic and very stable, possible an OPD kind of patient here, and to here a patient who's bad in shock and who's intubated and who's on ventilator, these kind of patients are there here. So around 80% of them will have a mild to moderate illness, 15% of them will have a serious illness which is requiring hospitalization, possibly ICU care, and 5% of them will be critical in shock, in acute respiratory distress syndrome, needing ventilator. Then radiologic findings, some of them you may be interested. So all sorts of radiologic manifestations are there, from a normal X-ray to a full-blown ARDS is seen, but the commonest ones are these reticulonodular opacities that you see in both sides, and this ground glassing that you are seeing. Can you see this ground glassing? So this ground glassing, and then this atelectasis in some areas, and sometimes this broad area of ground glassing with a crazy pavement pattern, nodules, lobar consolidations, everything can be seen, and there is no single radiologic appearance. But mainly reticulonodular opacities and ground glassing are the radiologic features of this illness, and hypoxia is a very characteristic feature. Now, our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare has given out some diagnostic criteria for the H1N1, this NCOV, like it also gave for H1N1. So here, for anybody, for you to suspect that I have got NCOV, they should have some history of travel to the country where the infection is in hotspot, like I told you, Iran, Italy, China, and South Korea. But surprising that people are also finding cases on ships, which are actually not even, they are not into the land. But even on ships, I don't know how they are testing those people who are on ships, but 2 to 3 ships have been not yet grounded. They are just into the sea only because they have got cases over there. So essentially, this definition will have some flaws because the community transmission has started. So if we press key, I want to tell you if you had some contact from China or somebody who traveled to China, or you are in contact with somebody who's a known case, you may not find that history, but a patient may suddenly turn out to be NCOV positive. That may happen because community transmission has begun. And then these are the definition of a suspect case and a probable case. But just to underline thing, it's a very non-specific illness, and therefore for somebody to be labeled as he has got this COVID disease, one has to have an RT-PCR. Otherwise, one cannot diagnose because all those viral pneumonias essentially look the same. Now, if suppose you manage to diagnose the case that yes, he has got this COVID disease or whatever. So right now, what are the current recommendations? So currently in this city, we are supposed to, any suspected case or any proven case is not to be managed by us. The person is to be sent to the Naidu hospital, which is the infectious disease hospital, and he will be placed in isolation over there, and he will be given only symptomatic treatment because there is no antiviral drug available, as I will show you in the next slide. But even while collecting samples of suspected cases, one has to actually take all the airborne precautions, don all that N95 mask and goggles, and then take the sample, because the patient might just cough while you are taking the sample, and it will generate an aerosol, and you will get healthcare transmission of the disease. So the treatment is mainly supportive, and it is very important to recognize people and isolate them so that the community transmission can be stopped. There is no RCT evidence as of now that a particular drug will work against this disease, and it won't work against this. Now there are some drugs which have been used, and I've made a list of the interventions that have been used. So people have tried with some success intravenous immunoglobulin with the thinking that it will have some neutralizing antibodies against the coronaviruses. Very, very short doses of glucocorticoids from 3 to 5 days of methylprednisolone, very small dose. People have tried, but recently, just 1 week back, WHO and CDC, both of these institutions said that actually use of glucocorticoids may be detrimental. So somebody who has got an underlying COPD or something for which you want to give steroids may be an indication, but otherwise just because somebody has this COVID disease, steroids should not be given because it may actually worsen the disease or may increase the risk of secondary infections. Then people have tried to give this convalescent plasma, oseltamivir, nebulization with interferons has been tried. Now, interesting fact is this lopinavir ritonavir. So some of you may be knowing that this is an anti-HIV drug which acts against the viral proteases. But this virus, as I showed you in the life cycle of the virus, will also have proteases in the life cycle. So it is not specific for HIV proteases. For any viral proteases, this will work. And therefore, it has been tried with some partial success, but I cannot say for sure that this is the drug which is of choice. But they have also tried it in closely related other viruses like MERS-CoV, which is Middle East Respiratory Virus, or SARS in 2003. This was tried to some extent. Now we are really looking at this new drug called as remdesivir. So remdesivir is a nucleotide analog, and they tried to use it in Ebola epidemic, which happened in Africa some years ago. It is going on. So this drug has shown certain benefit in some of the cases, and it has just entered in the US in the clinical trial for treatment of COVID, but the data is yet to come out, but this is one drug which we are looking at. And then obviously all sorts of antibiotics for secondary infections, people have tried on this, and then a lot of debate is going on whether you should give it in first week, second week. and it will probably an endless debate. But yes, secondary bacterial infections can happen in this, and antibiotics will be required, but whether they should be given early on or later and how much they will actually contribute to cure is again a debatable issue. Now there are vaccines in development, but as I told you, almost 20 candidate vaccines are there in development for this particular disease. None of the vaccine has yet shown efficacy. The trials are in a very, very basic level right now. They have not even reached phase 3 or phase 4. But because of the hypermutability of the virus, which I showed in the previous slides, it has become very difficult to get one single vaccine which will work against all the genotypes of the virus. Now, in my last slide, I would like to tell you about the special characteristics of this disease, which makes it slightly different than the H1N1 or the SARS or the MERS-CoV. That this disease is not only transmitted by droplets, but it is transmitted by person-to-person contact, and it is suspected that it actually is airborne contact. And that's why when you are dealing with a suspected or an infectious case, you actually will have to enter the room with the full-blown that respirator kind of thing in which you look an astronaut, and a patient has to be kept in an isolation, negative pressure room when you enter this patient's room. So this is what, and actually this is droplet transmission for H1N1. So this is airborne for this particular disease. The disease is transmissible during the incubation period in which the patient has not become symptomatic. The symptoms are going to come after 2-3 days, but patient is harboring the virus, and in that phase also he can transmit the disease to others. So this is the important mechanism by which actually asymptomatic people are able to infect the other people. Considering diabetes and other comorbidities, if suppose somebody comes in contact with them and he is actually asymptomatic, he may just transmit the virus to a person who is immunocompromised. He may catch the infection. Mutability is an important characteristic which I just discussed. This virus has a unique ability to infect both upper respiratory as well as lower respiratory. That means intrapulmonary epithelial cells, which is the property lacked by the H1N1, or even it is not very much seen in SARS and MERS. So this is a unique ability of this virus, and therefore it has a predilection to cause low respiratory disease. Now mortality is very high as compared to H1N1. So if you ask me what was the mortality of H1N1, it was 0.1%. And for this particular disease, the mortality is between 3 to 4%. So it is definitely hundreds times higher, 300 times higher. And this is again unique characteristic of this particular disease. Now cases in China have peaked around Jan. But whatever public health model, I was just talking to Dr. Kadam in the audience, the public health models about the progression of the epidemic have shown that the epidemic in the world has now begun, and it will probably peak somewhere in the second week of April, and then gradually the cases will start going down. So 10 days ago when I saw the reports of this, it was causing 1,000 new infections in China and 100 deaths in China. Now it is causing 2,000 new infections in the world, but the cases in China have come down to 150. So the China epidemic is waning, the world epidemic is going up. Somewhere around April there will be peak. There are various people who think that India's temperature is higher, the virus may not sustain that much higher temperature. This is all theoretical. Yes, virus is best grown at say between 20 to 26 degrees, and in April somewhere we'll have temperatures around 40 possibly here. So whether the virus will survive over that, we don't know, but the virus has an ability to survive on the surfaces for nearly 12 hours. So whether that makes a difference, one needs to see. So this is about what I had to tell about this COVID disease. And for you people, all of us basically, this hand rub now, alcohol-based hand rubs are very difficult to find in the pharmacy. They are possibly out because everybody wants to buy them. But if you are healthy yourself, you don't need to wear mask in public places. If you are sick, then obviously you should not go into the public places. So only people who are sick, who are having runny nose, who are having cough, they should wear mask. Patients should wear mask, and healthcare workers who are actually taking care of those people should wear mask. But when you are roaming around in a conference like this, or you are going on a train station or on a airport, and if you are healthy, you need not wear a mask, because actually the problem will come that mask will not be available if everyone wants to use it. Then their disposal will be a problem if it's a biomedical waste, and you cannot put that mask which is used in any dustbin. It has to be put in that yellow dustbin. So that these are the things, and then one has to just be generally very careful. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bharat Purandare. I think he has tried to cover almost all the points that we all wanted to know. My question to you, sir, is that in our practical approach, when the patient walks into the OPD, how to approach the patient, and if we actually suspect, sometimes the patient may not go to Naidu Hospital. So should we get him admitted, do the H1N1 test, other things, and then say that everything is negative? Now you go to Naidu.
See, as of now, everything is very fluid. So what I'm saying now may be incorrect after 7 days or 15 days because the new guidelines keep on coming and changing. But if, see what happened only yesterday's experience I'll tell you that I was sitting in my clinic and one person came and said that I got a lot of runny nose, cough, and then, so I became alert and I have always a mask kept in my, this which I put on my this thing. But obviously if he's got something like COVID or something, this simple mask won't work. You know, you'll have to have N95 mask. But this patient said that I have gone to US 1.5 months back. So that doesn't fit, you know. So if somebody who's in last 14 days, which is the incubation period of the virus, has gone to the hotspots, which I told you, the 4 hotspots, and coming back with respiratory symptoms, then you'll have to suspect it. Now, in the private sector, you cannot test for this virus. So the testing is only restricted by the NIV, only NIV is going to do it. And NIV is saying that we are going to accept samples only if it comes from the infectious disease hospital, which is Naidu Hospital. So ultimately, if you're suspecting it strongly, we'll have to tell the patient that, okay, you'll have to go and get admitted in the isolation ward of Naidu Hospital. From there, they will send the RT-PCR. And if the RT-PCR comes positive, then maybe you are positive. But your symptoms are non-specific. And it may come because of even other coronaviruses which are not novel coronavirus. It may come from H1N1 or seasonal influenza. So I can give you right now only symptomatic treatment. That's what one can say at present. Now they have designated 7 hospitals in this city and told them that you preserve 8 to 10 beds for these people. But instructions are not very clear whether we should start admitting them. Because if we are admitting them and they are not accepting the swabs, there is no meaning in admitting them.
You said patient is asymptomatic, still transmission can occur. Then how to take precautions?
So that's why I told you that it is very difficult to contain the virus. China, who has got like iron ball and all those feast and everything, could not control, and so many cases died there. Because the pre-symptomatic transmission is the person is roaming around in the community. He is not yet sick. He is going to fall sick after 2 days. And even if he stays home after that, in those 2 days he has met many persons, and it's an airborne transmission. So any persons who have come in contact with him within 6 feet of his distance, and it's a fomite-borne transmission also. So it may be there on his nose, it may be there on his hands. If you handshake with them, you can catch the virus. So you have to be just generally alert.
Hello.
See, because I showed you that phylogenetic analysis, it said that it came from bats, then it jumped onto some intermediate host, and from another virus it picked up in some genetic material, got reassorted, and a new virus formed. So that Wuhan is known to have some market where they are actually selling wild live animals whom they slaughter and then they eat. And possibly they eat partially cooked meat or something. I don't know what their practices are, but possibly this is what was found to be the cause, that all the cases, initial few ones, had contact with that local seafood market in Wuhan. So from there the origin is suspected, but nobody can be sure. Now there are theories that it is actually there is some biological warfare and all those are just theories. But if you see the phylogenetic analysis which I showed, it has picked up genetic material from the pre-existing virus. So not a new virus at all. So it has just, it's something like you get a reshuffled computer or some kind of thing, kind of that genetic material reshuffled from various places. But 88% similar to the SARS, which we found in 2003. So this is the theory that probably it originated from seafood market at Wuhan because of the meat intake.
Dr. Bharat.
Yeah, one more question,
Yeah,
please.
so suppose you examine a patient in OPD who fits in that suspected case, you referred patient to Naidu. What do you do with your OPD room after examining the patient?
See, this is all very, very uncertain. It's a gray zone because, suppose that person was infected and then you sent him to that other hospital where ultimately they found that actually he came positive, then actually you should put yourself in quarantine because you came in contact. So not only referring the patient to that Naidu hospital is important, but to have some local contact over there who can tell you ultimately that patient came positive or not. That is very important for you to know.
And you'll have to shut your OPD for 14 days.
Yeah, not only that, what do you do about the next few patients in your OPD on that day when you referred the patient?
See, you will have to do the hand hygiene between the patients. So if suppose you have picked up accidentally virus from that patient, and if you do good hand hygiene between, unlikely that you will transmit it to others.
In case, and one more comment would be, in case you have a suspected people who are coughing. Now, with last 3 months, we've been seeing so many cough and cold. You need to keep a mask outside and ask all people who are coughing to wear a mask and keep. So that way the transmission rate goes down. Otherwise, in the OPD line itself, you're getting infected.
What is the probable cause that now the incidence in China has gone down?
So any epidemic, if you see I don't know whether there is an epidemiologist in the audience, but any epidemic will have a peak. It will have actually go kind of a bell-shaped curve. Peak, then plateau, and then it goes down. So possibly the immunity, the herd immunity which I was talking about, is gradually developing in people who have come in contact with the virus, and that's why the cases are going down. So China yesterday reported only 146 cases, but the rest of the world reported 2,200 cases. So that herd immunity will now develop in South Korea, Iran, and gradually their numbers will go down. But ultimately, it is still a dangerous virus.
Regarding the vaccine, the regular flu vaccine, what we take, will it be of any help or no help at all?
No, the regular flu vaccine will not be of any help, but this is something which you can prevent, vaccine preventable disease, and definitely it will make you prone for other illnesses if you get this H1N1. So you should take the seasonal influenza vaccine annually, if at all. I mean, now there is an indication for everybody, so everybody should take it, but it won't have any protection against this.
Last question, please.
Yeah, apparently this virus, like the SARS, binds to that ACE2. Does that have any clinical implications? Because
Yeah, so they have found that there are 2-3 viruses, and there are other also receptors, but for this particular virus, this ACE2 is supposed to be the receptor which is present on the nasal or respiratory epithelial cells, and that S protein, knob-like protein which I showed you, actually attaches to that ACE2, and from there it gets endocytosed. But whether they are developing any drug targeting that ACE2 or our ACE inhibitors which we normally use, they will work on it, I don't know. Maybe that research has to be done. Some basic research will have to be done.
Thank you, Dr. Bharat. Last comment. Since medical days, we are into mnemonics. We all remember mnemonics. Since we came out from Wuhan, I put in a small mnemonic here. W is wash your hands. U, use your mask. Handle with care. Avoid crowds. And of course, the world is coming to know how to say namaste. So greet yourself with namaste. Thank you, Bharat.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Bharat Purandare, sir, Dr. Abhijit Baldota, Dr. Vineet Rao, Dr. Ravindra Joshi,